Hi guys, Gilly Hunt here with a little snack wrapper for you, but also a small lesson in simple use of the Stampin Blend pens. So we're going to have a go doing the Hogs and Kisses little logo, ready to go on our snack wrapper. So I'm going to show you the stamping first of all. So this is where we're aiming for. And I've chosen a series of colours and I'm going to just show you what they are. We've got dark Flirty Flamingo, we've got light Flirty Flamingo. I'll just put them to one side so you can follow. I've got light Calypso Coral, and I've got dark Petal Pink and a light Petal Pink. And I've got light Granny Apple Green and light Old Olive. Now, it's up to you which colours you use, but I find when I'm colouring something like this lovely pig that I want the orangey, neutral sort of tones, peachy tones of his skin, but then I want, can you see on his little cheek and little tiny accents of the brighter pinks? And so that's why I've got the light and dark Flirty Flamingo for my little sharp, more kind of pinky purpley highlights, and these three which are much more lovely orangey neutral tones. And then I've chosen, instead of choosing to have a light and a dark of the same colour, I've actually chosen two of the light colours because I wanted the earth to have a slightly different feel to it. It's not actually sort of specifically blended colours, it's almost two tones, and that two tone is much easier to make with two colours. So there he is, nice and close up, and let's have a go. So I'm going to put all those colours to one side, but you know what colours I've got that I'm reaching for, and I'm going to bring in the Hogs and Kisses, which is a fabulous stamp, and this is going out of the catalogue really soon, so if you really want this, get it now, and it's so fabulous. I've used it for hundreds of things. It's called This Little Piggy, and it has, you know, she believed she could, so pigs might fly, and you make me happy. There's some lovely sayings here, and some really jolly little piglets. I'm rather taken with this, I must say. I think it's one of those Marmite stamp sets. People either go, why would I want to send a card with a pig on? Well, I'm a bit of a country bumpkin out here, and I love the idea of sending Hogs and Kisses to someone. It's kind of a nice way of saying you really care without being too soppy at all. Okay, so here we go. We're going to take some Whisper White cardstock because this has got such a nice smooth surface that it works well with the Stampin' Blends. We're going to take some Memento ink. And why are we using Memento? Because it's a dye-based ink. Any dye-based ink is fine. So any of our colours, any of the Stampin' Up coloured inks which are dye-based, or in fact anybody else's dye-based inks, but I would suggest ours because they're great quality. And also the Memento is a really good one for giving us a nice simple black sharp image. Why do we use dye-based? Because the alcohol inks will then not pick up the water-based ink. We always want the opposite. So if you're working with and colouring with something which is alcohol or solvent based, you need a dye-based ink, and vice versa. If you're using watercolour pencils, you want a solvent-based ink. So there we go. Here's our Hogs and Kisses. So let's get started with the colouring. And the first thing I'm going to suggest to you, and everybody has their own way of working with blender pens. For a very long time, I've worked with graphic artists and Copic pens until I found these wonderful Stampin' Up markers, which are lush and beautiful. And I'm going to show you how I was taught to do it. So I'm going to take the two colours that are my, do you remember? I'm just going to bring them back in. We have the pinky tones, which are these two. We've got the greens. So let's just pop them over right on the very edge. And then we have these three, which are the more orangey tones. So I'm going to take the two very lightest. We're hardly going to use the Calypso Coral, but it's just going to be there for a little bit of last minute extra shadows. So I'm going to take the two lightest, and I'm going to take the very lightest, which is the light petal pink, and I am going to colour absolutely everything on my pig. But the first thing I'm going to do, and this is the thing I should have done right at the very beginning, is I'm going to put a piece of scrap card underneath, and you can see why. Look, this is where I've been colouring before, because these pens are designed to soak the paper, so they do go through. So put something underneath to soak up any spare. So here we go, light petal pink, and I am going to work quite quickly, because once you start, what you need to do is you need to soak the paper absolutely thoroughly. But you also need, when you're blending, to work with the area whilst it's still wet. If it's already dried up, then it's too late and it's too... Okay, so I'm going to go right over, I'm going to get this totally soaking wet. I want to be able to really see that the paper has got soaked to the skin. So it should be, look at this, it's totally soaked through. So I'm going to work whilst it's still lovely and wet, and I'm going to imagine that this is almost like a football, because it is almost, and I'm going to just edge the edges of the football. Can you see what I'm doing? And then I'm going to just colour in the back of the two legs, that one and that one, because they're at the back. Okay, so I've now coloured in. I'm going to try and get it up here so you can see. Can you see? I've actually coloured around the edges of the football, because then I'm making sure he's a rounded shape. And I'm going to the backs of the back legs. Why do I go to the back leg? Because if you imagine he is standing up, that's where the shadows are going to be, because his big fat belly here is going to throw a shadow. If the sun's shining across, and I'm imagining that the sun is shining, let me just find my scissors. What have I got? Oh, here we go. I'll use a little stick, because I can keep bringing this in. So I'm imagining that this is shining like this. Now, in fact, I'm going to just get myself a quick, here we go, a quick pen, just to help you. I'm going to pop a little arrow on. Okay, the sun is shining in this direction. It's coming, zooming in, and it's hitting here, because this is the fat bit that's going to stick out. You've got to imagine what would stick out and hit the sun. So this piece here would hit the sun. These pieces would be starting to go round into the shadows. Does that make sense? Okay, this piece would be starting to go into the shadow. Definitely his bottom would be. So let's just go back with a little bit more dark on his bottom, because I didn't really do his bottom very much. Okay, so I'm going to go along these edges here. Now the fabulous thing, and I'm going to go right round underneath his nose, because he would definitely have some shadow. His nose would be throwing some shadows, and the back of the two ears, so this one would be shadowed. Remember, the sun's coming in here. This one would be all light and bright, and this one would be hiding from the sun behind this one. And so would this side of the ear, because this is also just popping around the back. Okay, so I'm imagining that sunshine areas. So there you go. Okay, there's my first layer. Now the fabulous thing with Stampin' Blends is that they are alcohol based, so every time you go back in, it doesn't go darker. So if I put 100 layers of dark petal pink, it's not going to suddenly go darker and darker and darker. It's still going to be dark petal pink. Okay, the light petal pink will never become as dark as the dark petal pink. It doesn't matter how many times I layer it on top. That only happens when you've got water-based colouring. When you've got water-based colouring, if you had a light and a dark colour, if you over and over and over and over layered the light, you can often get to the dark colour. Not always, but often. And also, if you just very gently use the dark, you can often get a light. So imagine a red crayon. You can usually get a light pink by just very gently crayoning. That's with water base. Now with Stampin' Blends, because they're alcohol solvent based, they never get a different colour ever, and that's why they work so beautifully to blend, because it doesn't matter how many times you go over it, it's still the same colour. And the only thing we can do is we can join up the colours. So that's what we're now going to do. We've got this quite darker layer all the way around now, and now we're going to just blend it together. So I'm going back in with the light pink, and remember, each time we get the paper wet with the solvent, the blending will start to happen. So I'm going in and I'm getting it really, really wet. And what will start to happen, and you'll see it in a moment, I'll just show you, I'll just get it going. Right, is this light colour, and this is the other thing you have to think about when you're colouring with these colours. This light colour now is going to push the dark colour out of the way. It doesn't blend with it, it pushes it out of the way. So very quickly, whilst this is still wet, I now need to bring a little bit of the dark back in. So I'm going to just bring a bit of the dark back in, and I'm going to take a little bit of the light back out. Okay, bring the dark back in, and if I do this just really quite nice and quickly. Okay, now let me always put my caps back on. Don't leave them off too long because they will dry up. That now has allowed that edge to completely vanish. Now you have what seems to be an edge here, but actually that's just where it's dry and where it's wet. Can you see there on the back, you can see the wet edge. Okay, now once that's dry, because we have gone across that edge there, that wet edge, with lots and lots of the lightest colour, if I do that, lots and lots of the lightest colour, that will still stay lovely and light. And what we've done is we've now got, if you notice the difference between this top section here, let's just show you, this top section here, where the dark is going to blend, compared to here where we've got a straight edge. Okay, so we're now going to work on this edge, and I'm going to show you again. We're going to go in with the lightest, and I'm doing it in lots of little tiny swirly. Okay, and I'm going to get it really lovely and soaking wet. Remember, it's the soaking wet that works, and that's why you need a really good paper. And then I'm going to just bring this dark back in through that light. Okay. And then I'm going to just double check that we keep this light patch here. Do you remember we said where the light was falling, we want this piece here to be light and bright, because this is where the light will catch on his big fat tummy. Okay, and now that again will just take a little while, because look, it's soaking wet, and that's what we're looking for, really soaking wet paper. And this is also the difference between great paper and poor paper. Poor paper will start to pill and make little nasty messes. Beautiful smooth paper like the Whisper White from Stampin' Up, it's just our standard Whisper White, not the thick, extra thick. You just want the thin, because it has a special coated surface for just this exact thing. Now can you see now we've lost that edge? We've still got the darkness, but we've lost the edge. We've now got a slightly brighter. And I'm now going to just do that quickly around the rest of this little chap. So I'm going to blend the pieces that we've done with the darker pieces. Okay, now I'm not going to blend where we've gone for shadow. Okay, and sometimes The lovely thing with this is you can use, you know, you can keep going back. You could do little bits at a time. And I like to do it tiny pieces at a time because then you can really get the subtlety. You know, we want a really subtle finish. The final finish on this is almost like a storybook finish. You know, there's no way you can see the gaps of the only time there is a line is here and here where it's the line for the shadow. So even the cheek is blushed and beautifully sort of blended across. So there's no lines on the original, and that's where we're going with this. So can you see now we've lost all our lines, but we've still kept the darkness on his back, the darkness on his belly, and the lightness across this central section. Okay. So let's go back in, and I'm going to just go in with a tiny little bit of the light Calypso Coral. Now this is considerably darker than these two, and in fact if I just do a little scribble on the side I'll show you. There's the Calypso Coral. Here was our dark petal pink, and here was our light petal pink. Okay, so it's almost as if this is a slightly pinkier version of the next tone along from those. So we're going to have to be quite careful, not use too much. So I'm going to the very same places. I'm going to the bottom of his belly because this is where we want a little bit of shadow. I'm going to his back leg. I'm going to anywhere where there might be a little bit of shadow under his nose. Okay, and across his bottom. And now I'm going to pick up the darker of the petal pinks because it's not going to blend with the lighter one so well. It'll blend best with the darker one. And I'm not going too far in to the card. I'm sticking with these edges because I want to keep that lighter, brighter bit at the top of the edges. Okay, and I'm going to go back across the central area with the light, just to ensure that we haven't got some nasty stripes. Okay, and can you see we're now beginning to get a lovely pinky tone as well as the blending. Now I think this is a bit harsh here. Can you see where it's almost a bit more of a stripe? So I'm going to come back in again with a little bit of the darker just here. So this is the dark petal pink. I'm just going to face, and I'm working just on that little joiny area. I might just put a tiny bit more of the darker Calypso Coral in because we don't want to lose the darkness. We just want to blend it. Okay. And a tiny little bit of the pale just across that middle section to make sure we don't have a line. And I think that's, to me, that's a little bit nicer. It will, again, it's very wet at the moment. It will dry, and it will dry much nicer. Okay, so now I've looked at him, I'm thinking that these front legs, we've done the darker on the back legs, these front legs look a bit, ooh, bright. Okay, so I think we need a little piece of the dark, but I don't want it to be totally dark, so I'm just going to put a little bit of dark on one side. I'm not really working, I'm keeping one side a little bit whiter. Does that make sense? There you go. So we've still got the lighter because those little limbs would be sort of sticking out in the sun. Here's the sun, and it would be hitting on those, so they would be brighter, but we just don't want it to sort of look like he's got funny different coloured legs from his body. So I'm just going to just blend it a little bit with where the body joins. Okay, there we go. And I'm now quite happy that I've got all the lovely mellow tones of my little pig. And now I want to make him into that caricature pig, so he's got little bright cheeks. So I'm going to put those to one side. I might come back to them and use them to help blend it. But I'm now going to take a little tiny bit of the dark Flirty Flamingo. And I'm going to put a little patch just by his eye, just here. Okay, and I'm going to put a little patch too in the back of his ear. Don't ask me why, but I think it looks good. I've tried this before and it just looks right. And then I'm going to use the light Flirty Flamingo just to blend that edge so it's not quite so... Okay, so it's just taking the edge off it. And now I'm going to go back to the palest, the light pink, and I'm just going to make sure that edge is a little bit softer. I'm not really going into the colouring, I'm just dibbling around the edges just to sort of make the edge bleed together. Okay, there you go. And can you see I'm almost like pushing it back. Where I want it to go a little bit less, I'm pushing it back. There we go. And he's now got a really rather lovely little perky little cheek. Okay, and I'm quite fancying a little pink bit on the end of his nose too, but I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm going in with the lighter of the flamingo for his little nose, and I'm also going to do his little trotters, just because I want his little trotters to look a tiny bit different from the rest of him. And I'm also going to give his tail, and I'm going to go onto the, ooh, excuse me, knocking the whole thing. I'm going to go onto the pen end because really and truly I can't get in with the other as easily. So I'm just going to do a little bit on his tail. Okay, and I'm quite happy with that. That seems to have got me a really nice little piglet. So I'm now going to look at the grass, and I'm going to use some of the light olive, and I am just going to do it really roughly, just squiggly, 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 squiggly. I'm not aiming to sort of colour, I'm just aiming to squiggle, and I'm going to do the same just slightly higher up with the... Okay, and all that does, I'm not blending it, I'm not doing anything with it, all it does is it just moves it across. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do, now I've seen it, because I've remembered that when I did that I just used a little bit to blend it across, so I'm going to reach across now and see if I can find, here we go, a little bit of light sea foam, which I didn't tell you about at the beginning. What a sneaky person. Because what I want to do is I just want to blend that a little bit okay, along that edge. And again, I'm doing it in lots of little tiny circles. I'm hardly pressing. The big thing with colouring, I find, is that you really don't want to be pressing too hard. Okay, and when that dries, it will dry very pale, and that will just give us that slightly blended out look. Now, I'm also going to try something else whilst I'm here, just to show you. And I'm just trying to find that colour too. Here we go. Now, I'm quite happy with him like that, because that's what I've got. So we're going to keep him, and we're going to use him to make the wrap in a moment. But here's another thing you can do, which looks really effective. And it's one of those bizarre things that when you first see it, you think, what on earth is she doing? All right. Now, sometimes when you do a drawing, it looks very stark against the white. But then you think, but I want to keep it on a white piece of card. I don't want to go onto a coloured piece of card. So this is another way of just adding a little bit of detail. Now, when you're doing cartoony characters, you can make them cartoony. And this is almost making it as if he's been cut out. And what I'm doing is I'm choosing one of the paler, and I might have used seafoam, I might have used one of the paler blues, to just give it a surround. And it's one of those weird things. You will notice the surround because I've just been talking about it. But when that dries, and it's not quite so strong, which it will do once it's dry, and I'll show it you at the end, maybe once it's already dried, what you will notice is not the background at all, but you will notice the little pig. And all that will have happened is it will have pushed the pig into the foreground. It almost kind of adds a background shadow. Okay, and I quite like to do that. You can also do that by fading it with, I might have used the soft sea foam as well, which is much paler, just to fade that edge as well, but I quite like just a simple outline, but it just shows you the difference. And I think they're equally as nice, so it's up to you. We're going to take this little Hogs and Kisses and make our sweet wrapper now. Okay, so this is what we're going to need to make it with. We're going to need a piece of card which is 2 inches wide all the way across, and the length of your snack twice over. Right, so I'm going to take a little Twix bar, so it's the length of this once. Oh, excuse me, coughing. I have been really fighting this cough for a very long time. I do think I may have had the virus about 2 months ago, and it's left me with this horrible little cough. So twice 2 inches wide, so width is 2-inch strip. Then you want the length of the snack twice, plus the width of the snack once. Okay, so twice the length, 1 time the width. So for me, those were my measurements. And then you're going to also add 2 inches onto the whatever you've decided was your twice the length. So that's 1, twice the length, then the width, and then you've also got an extra 1 inch. And then you're going to score the length of the snack plus 1 inch. So that's that way, and score. And the same from this end, so do it from both ends. The length of your snack plus 1 inch, score again. And that's the little wrapper. And then we're going to take our Twix, and I've put a couple of little glue dots on the back, and I'm simply going to place that in the middle and make sure it's glue dotted down. Okay, let's just do them a little bit further up. And the nice thing with doing it with a glue dot is you can just wiggle it about just to make sure it's nice and centered. Okay, and I want him to fit nice and tight, so I've done that quite tight. I haven't made much allowance for the snack, it's just the length. Okay, now the ends were made using the tag top punch. So when I got all the measurements done, I just popped that in, clumped it down, and that stamps out the punch tag top. And I've just done that, and I haven't lined it up properly, so you'll have to imagine that's lovely and smart like that end. Sorry about that. We can all make mistakes, can't we? Okay, so there we go. We're going to tie it together, and I'm just going to put a little piece of lovely ribbon through. Before I put the ribbon through, come on, let me get my act together. Before I put the ribbon through, and I should probably have done this before I even put the snack in, I need to put the little Hogs and Kisses in. We nearly forgot him altogether. That's no good at all. So what I need is some little dimensionals, and I'm just going to put 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 in the middle. Take the taps off, and you'll notice they've got a little black line, so I know which one's been taken away because my lovely friend Baz showed me how to just put a line through with a pen when you first get these. They don't come with that line, but it does make it look easier to see which ones you've pulled off. So here he goes. Dear me, I wasn't organised with this one today, was I? There we go. And we're going to put this through, and we're going to hope it sort of covers up that nasty mess I made with that punch. Okay, so there we go. Oh, it does, look. So I'm going to take those through, and I'm not going to put them exactly together. I'm going to put one just a tiny bit higher than the other, with the lower one being on the same side as the Hogs and Kisses. I'm going to take a little bit of baker's twine or flax that I've just unpeeled, And I am just going to do a simple knot. Nothing fancy. I'm not going for bows. I'm just going for a knot. There we go. And I'm going to make it a double knot because I don't want it to come undone. There we go. And I'm just going to cut it. And there you have a really pretty little gift to pop on a table maybe for fun, or just a handout for fun. Okie doke, thanks very much, bye bye.